This is the OTB Television Network, a service of Capital District Off-Track Betting.
Good morning and welcome to Loose on the Lead on this Sunday morning. Seth Merrill from Equidaily.com, and look who's in the studio, Steve Bick from Sirius and XM's At the Races.
I was here last week, wasn't I?
No, you were down in York for Holiday Fest.
That was last week?
Yeah, you believe it? I thought the same thing. The middle of this week, I went out at my usual diner stop and got a hot turkey sandwich, and I thought...
That was your Thanksgiving?
No. But I thought, geez, Thanksgiving was just like 4 days ago, and I'm having hot turkey again already. And it seemed like Thanksgiving was a long time ago. But
You know, you could change it up, go with hot roast beef.
I did. Friday night after I played basketball, I went to hot roast beef.
How about the hot hamburger? You ever have the hot hamburger?
No.
Talk of the town up in Glens Falls, the burger with the gravy on top.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah.
No,
Fresh cut fries.
There was
That's eaten.
There was a spot in Amsterdam. It's not there anymore, but they specialized in
There's a few spots in Amsterdam that aren't there anymore.
Fries with gravy. That was the first place I ever had that.
Really?
Yeah.
We got to get you up to Montreal, a little poutine.
Well, they had that at a track a couple
Surely,
years ago, which
surely.
looked a little dicey. I don't know.
Oh, that's the best. With
Is it?
the,
All right. Maybe I'll have to try it. Speaking of trying, why don't we kick right off? It is the holiday season. We're into it. Every year you give some book suggestions. We've got some laid out here. Why don't you point out some that people might want to think about for the holiday season?
This has become one of our absolute institutions, and I think it's pretty well received. Nothing better than Christmas gifts for your horse fan on your list. Here are some suggestions. I'll start with one from last year, which was Elizabeth Lett's The $80 Champion. And this is being made into a movie, and so you'll get out ahead of it. And if you missed it last year, the opportunity to read it before the film comes out. It's an amazing story. Basically, a horse saved out of the kill pen that goes on to become a show ring champion. Long Reign, Jay Hubdy, when the book was released earlier this year, we had Jay on, of course, the executive columnist for the Daily Racing Form for many, many years. And Hubdy, collection of some of his best columns. These are a little bit of everything. Some of it's actually grouped by the topic, whether it's horses, whether it's riders, trainers, racetrack personalities, absent friends, as the saying goes, a collection of Jay's best work, and you'll enjoy it immensely. And then 3 new books that came out this year, Never Say Die, and James Nicholson, who is Kentucky-based. Never Say Die, a Kentucky Colt, the Epsom Derby, and the rise of the modern thoroughbred industry. This is a story that very few people know. The American-bred colt that ended up in England and wins the Epsom Derby, and you'll enjoy it immensely. It actually includes, remarkably, the Beatles to some extent. Pete Best's mother. The fifth Beatle, the Beatle, the drummer before Ringo. Pete Best's mother ran the club, the famous Liverpool nightclub that...
the Cellar or the...
Not the Cellar, exactly. But his mother bet heavily on Never Say Die, and it kept the club open. And so there's some very amazing tie-ins and angles. Here is Kevin Chong with Northern Dancer, and if you don't know the Northern Dancer story, you'll enjoy it. We think of him strictly as a sire these days, but he was a hell of a racehorse, and he was a horse that, in terms of his size, he was a little surprising because people, assume because he's a stallion, he's got to be a big strapping type. He wasn't at all. He was kind of a smaller, middle-sized horse. And then Duel for the Crown, Linda Carroll and David Rosner. And this is a book that really was well received, the Aladar Affirmed story, and all of these would make terrific presents for your horse fan on the list. Duel for the Crown, Northern Dancer, the $80 Champion, Long Reign, and Never Say Die. And actually, I think next week I'll have another 2 or 3 that didn't even bring with us. So there's more yet to come on our gift-giving idea show.
Very good. And so there are some ideas for you. Speaking of ideas and speaking of looking towards the future pool closed up last week after we were on the air. We talked a little bit about it on your radio show the other day. And we talked on the show last week about Dortmund, who comes out of the weekend as the shortest individual priced horse. All others was the shortest price. That was 3 to 5, understandably, in this November pool. But Dortmund at 9 to 1. And I said a couple of times last week, I wouldn't take 9 to 1 to get to the gate in May, much less this. But there were a couple of prices in there that were certainly interesting if you were going to shop around a little bit. Ocho, 29 to 1. Probably below mine. I started to maybe sniff or become interested, and I said last week, I forgot all about it on Sunday, so I didn't jump in this. But what would have been interesting to me was when you started to pop over maybe 30 to 1 or so, but Ostrolenko at 140 to 1 certainly offered some interest. Classy Edge 126 to 1. There were a few prices in there that if people wanted to take a shot, I wouldn't have argued with.
To me, there was actually probably 3 that were particularly attractive. And like you, all of a sudden I looked up. It was 10 after 6 on Sunday, and I was annoyed because I didn't get anything down. Upstart, we're going to talk about Rick Violette in a minute. Upstart ends up at 53 to 1. And that is a legitimate value on Upstart. A very good third in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and a lot to like about him going forward. How about another good price, Imperia, 27 to 1. And I was a little surprised that, here he comes running late after El Kabir. El Kabir in the Kentucky Jockey Club on Saturday. Imperia makes his first dirt start, and 27 to 1, that's okay.
But El Kabir, 74 to 1.
Yeah, well, because I think people have a question about El Kabir's distance limitations. And then the horse that was third in the Kentucky Jockey Club, Neil Howard, is already ahead of the curve when it comes to Neil and the way he battens down on horses. Not surprising that Eagle is still moving forward. He'll be better at 3 and with added distance. And Eagle, 54 to 1. So there were some attractive prices. Lord Nelson, who had some trouble in the Kentucky Jockey Club, the favorite, 72 to 1. So there were actually a few prices in here. If these horses can at least get to the Derby gate, some people will have some, I think, decent numbers. And one sidebar story to the Kentucky Derby future wager, they did get approval last week for I like this. They have a suggested concept. John Asher talked about it from Churchill. They're going to maybe, not for this year, but float for next year the potential of a Derby sire bet and have the same thing, 23 different stallions and a 24th all other stallions, and you'll be able to bet who the sire of the Derby winner will be. That'll be surprisingly popular.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see how that plays out.
That's a winner.
I'm going to be interested to see. Last year was the first year they had the November Pool 1, the 2-year-old first pool for the Derby. Only one horse out of that made it into the starting gate, and it's going to be interesting to see.
Who was
the
it?
Second year. Right on Curlin.
Right on Curlin, who's on the way back, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. And but I'll be interested to see if that was an aberration, or this year we'll get a few more in the starting gate, because I think that explains some of these prices going on last year. People were shying away a little bit, which I don't argue with, but it's going to be interesting to see. Speaking of the 3-year-old side of things, Keeneland has moved the Bluegrass Stakes date-wise. They kicked up the purse to $1 million, and it was probably one of those things that was just waiting for the other shoe to drop. In year 2014, trainers like this space between races, so they moved the Bluegrass 4 weeks out from the Kentucky Derby. It's really no shock.
This makes sense. The thing that it will do, of course, it'll put it into kind of I won't say competition per se, but between the Wood and the Santa Anita Derby on the same day, it will be a very special, it's already a great Saturday. It'll get even more spectacular, of course, with the Bluegrass as the third wheel, as it were. And all it leaves, of course, is the Arkansas Derby with that 3-week out position. And frankly, you won't see Charlie Sella, I don't think, change, because to be honest, the Arkansas Derby has been very productive the last decade, moving into the Kentucky Derby. So,
And as opposed to Keeneland, they would have to adjust their whole schedule. Keeneland doesn't have that.
They can't. They're not that they can't do, but they could move some things around, and that'll. A lot of people. It's funny, Seth, have already suggested, with the 3 races coming the same day now, is it time to resurrect the NTRA? Bet 3, the pick 3, the national thing. There's been a couple incantations of it. The public loves the multi-race wager, multi-track wager, and it does make a lot of sense. And I know it takes a lot of effort to do this, but it would be great.
Yeah, and some New York news over the past week. So various things. There was a couple of board meetings. The Franchise Oversight Board and then the NYRA Reorganization Board met this past week. Some news came out of those. But also in New York, Rick Violette was re-elected president of the New York Thoroughbred Horsemen's Association. That was news because he and Terry Finley, really for the past couple of months, have been going back and forth. Rick
wasn't going back and forth. Terry Finley was attacking on a constant basis.
Well,
that's just the reality.
And one of the things was medication, and that then bubbled over into the New York board meeting, which you had Rick Violette.
Bobby Flay, who sounds off on this topic and it kind of shoots from the hip, but very narrow, 14
which I think
margin.
shows that the topic is still up in the air, even among the horsemen. Between owners and trainers, I think there were maybe some different opinions overall, but it was a close vote, certainly. So again, I think it shows that some of these topics are worthy of debate and which way it goes.
Well, but here's the question. What exactly was up for debate? Because Terry Finley never specifically delineated, never gave a specific answer when asked about medication. At first, it was allegedly presumed that he was anti-Lasix. Then he said he wasn't anti-Lasix, but didn't have any real specifics about medication. He kept talking about change and transparency and a bunch of, frankly, bon mots and generalities, and never other than the one point that he brought out, which he did here when we talked to him, about doing a better job lobbying state government and being better positioned with the legislature and having more influence on that front. That was the one legitimate thing that came out when he talked about how we really haven't spent enough money as an association in terms of NYTHA, that we really haven't spent against advocating for the importance of the racing industry and the breeding industry in the state of New York. That was, I thought, the best platform and really the only platform that Finley really offered. The reality is that you've got Rick Violette that understands the topics at large. We have an uncertain future, which we've been talking about nonstop. We don't know what position and what form necessarily NYRA is going to take going forward. You needed somebody who is well in touch with all of those issues and the ramifications. And Rick Violette has done a thankless job for a long period of time without compensation, and he was the right choice in here. Certain outside forces tried to create controversy where there really wasn't any. Including some people that were trying to use this as an opportunity to push Alan Foreman out of the position of influence that he has. And that was as much of a motivation behind some of the people that were attacking Rick Violette needlessly. So this was the right result and the best result going forward.
Coming out of that New York Reorganization Board meeting this week, they talked about first time NYRA will have a profit in 13 years. A lot of that was reductions in staff, cuts.
That's the problem.
And but also some prices that got put up. They're also talking about raising prices again at Saratoga and Belmont this year, but won't announce those till early in 2015.
No, not admission. The conversation is about group sales, ticketing, or
Did they
group
specifically
sales.
say-
Group sales and parking were the
Okay.
two areas that Stover basically laid out. And the concern here is with the state's onerous presence, Seth, and their demand that NYRA stand on its own without the VLT revenues. What that influence has basically wrought is this cost-cutting, staff-cutting concept that really, in the long run, isn't good for the organization or for the business. Because as much customer service conversation as we hear, if you don't have the personnel at large and at hand to service the customers, what are you accomplishing? Basically, they've done this by really watching all the pennies and the nickels. This isn't a penny and nickel business. The thing that should be done is working toward growing the business, growing the handle. And we have that opportunity. And especially with the VLT monies, which are in a unique position to help NYRA do some things aggressively in terms of pricing the product, meaning the wagering product. You could do some very aggressive targeting on takeout, but unfortunately, whenever NYRA, Charlie Hayward's going to join us at the bottom of the hour, for many years, Barry Schwartz, and even before Barry, NYRA was working to lower takeout, and it was working. And then the state government comes in and basically forces the takeout back up. People may not remember, but takeout on the whips, on Win Place and Show, was down to 14% in New York until the state government, comes knocking on the door and demanding and forcing themselves on every decision that gets made. And so there's a lot of opportunity going forward, but trying to slash your expenses at the stake of the product and of the services and of the atmosphere, that's not a long-term strategy. And that's the concern. Okay, great, it's a profit, swell. Okay, so what does that mean? What was the importance of that?
Well, we know what the importance was at this time in the franchise, that they're being looked over the shoulder by.
But as we talked last week or 2 weeks ago, one of the issues here was Steve Christ addressed this with us. The state thought, oh, we're going to make NYRA this beautiful, attractive package, and somebody's going to come in and give us billions of dollars for it. And as Chris laid out, that was a mirage. And so they demanded that NYRA cut their costs and their overhead and become profitable because they thought that was going to enhance what they were going to offer for sale. But there's nothing to sell. So why this need to slash budgets and slash staffing? It's a counterproductive concept because they're not going to sell the franchise. So the goal that was laid out 2 years ago was completely a ridiculous objective. That's the whole point of this. I mean, the good news is there's a bunch of capital improvement projects that are laid out. It was a very nice laundry list of various improvements at Aqueduct, Belmont, and Saratoga in terms of upgrading the facility. So it was that part's very productive. But there's just too many outside influences here that are making it impossible to really make tangible progress against very important objectives.
Yeah, we'll see how this all plays out. I mean, things should firm up and change next year when, again, the franchise was potentially up for sale, but now, again, it looks more and more like it's just going to go back to NYRA situation.
It's going to be...
But again, that'll firm things up, and we'll see how that goes forward. Also, they announced 6 dates being reduced from the Aqueduct winter schedule, middle of February to March, I think.
Well, and yeah, they're going to just, because there were some ridiculous reasons given for the handle. The handle numbers were off again at the Aqueduct main track and grass season. It has not been a good fall and early winter handle-wise, but a lot of that, Dave Grenig quoted a number yesterday or Friday on the radio show, 93 races taken off the turf.
Yeah, I mean, the turf,
I mean,
you know,
that's,
Belmont and
forget
Aqueduct
it.
turf got
That'll kill you.
decimated.
That's, I mean,
absolutely.
that's a big portion. I mean, there is a lot of good handle news, actually, and we're going to talk about some of it with Charlie Hayward, who wrote a very positive piece at Thoroughbred Racing Commentary at his website, thoroughbredracing.com. And there's some good handle news around the country and good business news. Not a good fall, though, at Belmont and Aqueduct because of the poor weather.
Yeah, that just really took its toll, as it will when you lose turf racing. Obviously, handle's going to take a hit. All right, we'll take our first break. When we come back, got a couple of stakes from yesterday to take a look back at, and much more right after this. Stay tuned.
Go Zepper kicking clear, and Go Zepper is pulling away impressively.
Hysterical Lady, Ginger Punch to win it.
And it's Wilco in front, and he's going to pull off a huge upset here.
But it's Round Pond going on to take the distaff.
Awesome again. Sire of 10 Grade 1 winners, 4 Breeders' Cup champions, and 4 multimillionaires, standing at Adena Springs.
I'm Anthony Mormino, and after more than 30 years, HNC is moving. HNC and all your favorite OTV TV programming is moving from Time Warner Cable 12 to Digital Channel 8.2. Along with WXXA, you'll also be able to watch us on Comcast Cable 323, Midtel Cable 271, Mid-Hudson on 191, Verizon Fios 467, and Time Warner Cable on Channel 1250. For more information, log on to capitalotv.com.
It's more than just a sports bar. It's Stadium Cafe. Located at 389 Broadway in Saratoga, it's the place to be for great times and great food. Their menu features everything from gourmet entrees to your favorite wraps and sandwiches. Or maybe you just want to grab a beer and catch the game. So what can be better than that? How about 2 Stadium Cafes? There's also the Westside Stadium, right up the road at 112 Congress Street. Same great menu, same great service. Whether you're hanging at the bar or just relaxing outside on their spacious covered patio, you'll always leave knowing you'll be back again.
We love, above all, the staff. We love Dave Harmon, and the food is fantastic.
Not 1, but 2. 112 Congress Street, 389 Broadway. Guaranteed to be a home run.
Welcome back to Loose on the Lead. Seth Merrow and Steve Bick coming up a little later on. Charlie Hayward and Mike Welch. But we're going to take a look at some stakes action. Before we do that, speaking of stakes, the committee came out and graded stakes for 2015 have been announced. No changes on the top.
No, very little. And if you heard Rick Hammerly with me on Friday, Hammer explained the sort of, I won't call it a new philosophy, but the TOBA Graded Stake Committee, the American Graded Stake Committee, which of course is made up of mostly racing secretaries, they are going to try to keep the American Graded Stake program in line with the international percentages in terms of how many grade 1s there are and so forth. You know, there's an obvious issue that is out here, Seth, because supposed declining foal crops and so forth. Well, if we've got less horses running, well, there's the same number of stakes and the same number of graded stakes. And so doesn't the quality and the importance of the grade 1s, the grade 2s particularly, don't they become a little diluted? And that's, you know, long term, that is a concern. And they are going to try to very carefully monitor. And I think it's one of the reasons, for instance, there were a lot of people expecting that the Pennsylvania Derby and the Florida Oaks, the Fairgrounds Oaks would be upgraded to grade 1s. And the Fairground Oaks, it is tough to argue that the Fairground Oaks should be, at this point, a grade 1. However, we've learned that preps for things down the road. You remember when they upgraded the Fountain of Youth to a grade 1? It made no sense at all that the Florida Derby and Jim Dandy had that same experiment that failed. Preps leading to an ultimate goal, they should be grade 2s leading up to grade 1s. The Fairground Oaks is a tough one. Pennsylvania Derby is very close. You know, for people who think that this is arbitrary, it's not. There's a scoring system based on the horses that participate and what they have accomplished. And so, you know, once in a while they may they may add a little something to put a race over the top to a grade 1 or a grade 2 or even a grade 3. But generally, there's a scoring parameter that holds these races. One of the amazing things, frankly, through all of this, and granted, Keeneland now is back to dirt, but how Keeneland was able to retain their grade 1s on races like the Spinster and the Alcibiades and all of those races on synthetic racetracks where the horses that it produced for several years during the synthetic era, by all rights, I mean, Keeneland basically now gets to move right into the dirt. Everything that happens with Keeneland, it seems, is gold-plated and they're Teflon coated, and they get away with seemingly anything. But they survived the synthetic era, which downgraded their racing to the point where the bluegrass was, Mike Dempsey told us a couple of years ago, the bluegrass was this far from being downgraded from a grade 1 to grade 2, but not shockingly, that never happened. In terms of some local races, how did New York fare for the most part?
What are we looking at? We're looking at coming up, upgraded to a grade 3, the Weah up at Saratoga. I'm just looking. Anything else get upgraded? No. The Jerome upgraded to a 2.
Down.
The top,
Jerome went up or Jerome went down?
No. Excuse me. Yeah, it went down.
Jerome went down 2 to 3.
As did the Top Flight at Aqueduct. They went from 2s to 3s.
Yeah, and in terms of, there were no grade 1s that became grade 2s.
Or the opposite.
Or
they
grade
didn't
2s
go up
that
or go
became
down.
grade
No
1s.
change up at the top. So that's the situation with the graded stakes. Also, you wanted to touch on momentarily the John Veach story, which again continues. It was a couple of weeks ago they announced that a judge had looked at the case and said he should be reinstated and given back pay. Subsequently, the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission announced they will appeal that decision.
I don't know if you've heard me on the radio about this. It's a complete travesty, and it continues to be an embarrassment. If Kentucky had an ounce of decency or integrity, they would just do, I don't know if John even wants the job back, but pay his court costs and give him his back pay. This all stemmed, if you don't know the details of this, people think it was all the Life at 10 controversy. It was not the life. They used the Life at 10 situation to hurt John Veach. That was never the issue. The issue was between Lisa Underwood and Veach. Lisa Underwood wanted Veach to penalize Bernie Flint, and Veach refused. And as a result, Underwood utilized the Life at 10 situation vindictively against Veach. It is such a travesty that this continues, and that a guy like John Veach has to endure this embarrassment. It's just completely unfair and wrong, and everybody in the business knows that. And yet they continue at the KHRC and Kentucky. You would think that somebody in Kentucky state government would make this go away and make it equitable the way it should be. But no, it continues to be an ongoing attempt to shame Veach. It is disgusting that it continues like this. And you can only just keep rooting for John and hope that the money that he is spending to clear his name and get this thing righted ultimately comes out where it should.
Yeah, as you say, kind of a never-ending thing. We thought it was over a couple of weeks ago with that judge's decision, but no, it continues.
Well, all the circuit, all that court judge decided was that the oversight organization above the KHRC, that they didn't have the right to terminate John. That's what that decision was. It didn't say that, and it said that as a result of that, that the KHRC should provide the back pay and reinstate Veach. That does not limit the options that the KHRC have to say, well, we still thought, we as an organization now are terminating Veach. I mean, this is, you would think that after recognizing the first wrong, that was enough. But instead, they're going to exacerbate the wrongs and pile them up. I mean, it's preposterous.
Doubling down. All right, let's take a look at a couple of races before we go to commercial. And yesterday at Aqueduct, there was a horse running cross-entered at Laurel, and I said wherever Winning Image ran, I was going to pay attention because 63-year-old Tony Black on board, and we'll watch the stretch run of the Garland of Roses. It will be number 7, Expression, getting it done at 6-1, but number 4, Winning Image, and Tony Black runs second as the third choice in here at 5-2. The favorite was Willett at 6-5. Willett, the number 6 horse, will run third in here, but good race from Tony and Winning Image.
This was her last start, and it's going to turn out that it's Willett's last start as well. She likes to be on the lead, but you got to give Tony credit for giving the lead up to Bridgehampton and then coming back around. The entries, of course, that Mike Hushin was sending out, you knew that Bridgehampton was going to challenge on the front end, and that was Winning Image's biggest challenge. Tony was a little miffed, I think, afterward that he didn't dispatch Bridgehampton sooner, and then basically was left vulnerable to Charlie Baker's Expression. Charlie Baker's done a great job with Expression. Always happy when Charlie Baker does well, but it would have been nice to see Winning Image go off and retire. This is a hell of a race mare that Marty Scafidi owns. Mikey Arrow, the longtime New England trainer that relocated to the Mid-Atlantic about 8 years ago, did a brilliant job with her. $750,000 in earnings, 10 career stake wins, and a nice effort, but not the ending, certainly for Willett or for Winning Image, to send them off to their career as broodmares. But of course, one horse yesterday did go off successfully and end his career, and that was down at Laurel.
Yeah, we'll watch that. The Jennings yesterday, the highlight of the 4 stakes races. They ran $125,000. They traveled a mile, and the number 2, 8 Too Fast to Catch, won't miss this one because separates from the field by over 10 lengths as the 30-cent to $1 favorite. And as you said, Steve, the last race of the career. And one of those horses, we often lament horses going to the breeding shed too early and not giving us a chance to watch. But you toss in Ben's Cat from last week, and horses like this just are so much fun to watch and root for. 8 years old, went over the $1 million mark with this win. Forrest Boyce back up from the fairgrounds to ride. Really a nice career finale for 8 Too Fast to Catch.
Well, of course, this is a horse that was campaigned by the late Arnie Heft and his wife Sylvia. And Arnie Heft, a famous sportsman and team owner, of course, in the Mid-Atlantic region, an early pioneer of the National Basketball Association. Heft passed away this past year. A wonderful gentleman, and this was, of course, the last horse that the Hefts campaigned. And Tim Keefe, the head of the Maryland Horsemen, tremendous job with 8 Too Fast to Catch. A 107 buyer to end his career, and he is going to head off to the show ring and become an eventer. And so best of luck to 8 Too Fast to Catch. If you weren't paying attention to the Mid-Atlantic racing yesterday, there were a couple, as we go off to the break, a couple of races that you need to know about. Down at Parks, NASA for Pat Chapman. The Smarty Jones team, and this is a son of Smarty Jones. NASA, an 86 buyer, winning the Pennsylvania Nursery.
A race Smarty Jones won, I believe.
Absolutely, and keep an eye out for NASA. This was a nice performance, and it looks like a very nice horse for Mrs. Chapman. You also had Catalina Red break his maiden down at Tampa in the inaugural for Chad Stewart, 83 buyer. And back to Maryland for a second in the 2-year-old race. Rodney Jenkins has a horse, a Not for Love by the name of Golden Years. 83 buyer for him under Carrasco. This is a nice 2-year-old that is seemingly going to stretch out pretty well. So there were some under-the-radar 2-year-old non-graded races.
And on the girls' side of Maryland, Lady Sebago is nice.
Yeah, well, she aired. She crushed. Got a big... not a big buyer, but a decent number. Jerry Robb, of course, with Trevor McCarthy. So a few of the only one graded stake yesterday. We'll talk about the Claiming Crown races with Mike Welch after we visit with Charlie Hayward, who's going to join us right after the break. Come back with Charlie, thoroughbredracing.com, Thoroughbred Racing Commentary. Charlie Hayward next.
I don't know. You hang around here. What do you think?
Fascinated by the world of horse racing? Interested in honing your handicapping skills? Class is in session. Night school, Monday nights. Easy to access online. It's free, interactive, and informative for the casual and serious race fan. Horse Player Now Buzz. Live horses to watch emailed to you daily. Our eyes, your prize. Night School in the Buzz. Visit horseplayernow.com for details.
We're moving. OTB TV is moving. Beginning January 1st, racing across America and all your favorite OTB TV programming is moving from Time Warner Cable Channel 12 to Digital Channel 8.2. Along with WXXA, you'll also be able to watch us on Comcast Cable 323, Midtel Cable 271, Mid-Hudson 191, Verizon Fios 467, and Time Warner Cable on Channel 1250. For more information, log on to capitalotb.com and we'll see you there.
I didn't want to get just any degree after high school.
Horse racing has always been my passion.
I was already a lawyer.
When I was young, my dad took me to the races. The sound of the crowd. I still remember.
I'm 40, and I don't want to stay in a career I don't love.
I want to follow my passion.
Follow your passion at the University of Arizona Racetrack Industry Program.
Missed one of our TV shows? No worries. Now you can catch all your favorite programs online. Simply log on to capitalotv.com and click on the YouTube link at the bottom of the homepage. And look for our new podcast coming soon. capitalotv.com. Log on today.
Welcome back to Loose on the Lead. Seth Merrow and Steve Bick. We're happy to be joined now by Charlie Hayward from ThoroughbredRacingCommentary.com. Good morning, Charlie.
Hey, Seth and Steve. Great to be with you.
And Charlie, we're happy to have you on board. You've had some pieces on the website recently, and it's a website I continue to recommend to people. How old is it now?
Thank you for your kind words. We published our first article October 23rd, 2014. So we're coming up on, I guess, we're about 11 months or so.
Very good. And again, it's a great website that covers, and it is commentary on racing, but there's also a lot of great information about foreign racing as well. But as I say, you've had a couple of articles recently that were very intriguing, written by you personally. We wanted to touch on some of those. One of them, your most recent article from a couple of days ago, good news from American racing this fall. And you touched on some of the things that I think we all agree on. And I want to touch on, start out with good news item number one. We've talked about it here on this program over the past few weeks, but certainly with things wrapping up out at Del Mar and the numbers they put up, boy, that Del Mar season, it was a question mark how it would compare. And obviously the numbers weren't as fantastic as they are Del Mar summer, but compared to what they typically do out in Southern California in the fall, the brand name at Del Mar attracted some really big attention.
Yeah, you know, one of my very close friends is a good guy who I won't quote here, and, you know, he was thrilled that Del Mar picked up some of the Hollywood dates, but he was concerned about getting the attendance out, whether people were going to wager on it, and, boy, the new turf course worked out great. They had no problems with injuries on the track, and the number that stood out to me was, you know, you're dealing with a much smaller population base down there, but obviously with a brand name. But the handle, the on-track handle for the Del Mar meet was up 84.9% over the Hollywood meet last fall, right there in L.A. So, you know, I think it's great news for Del Mar, California, and for the industry.
Charlie, got to also fold into the piece that you wrote, the interesting element that the renaming of Calder Gulfstream West. And this was strictly a rebranding. It involved, of course, the negotiations that put an end to the Stronach versus CDI confrontation that had basically gone on for close to a year. And just the brand name recognition of Gulfstream bolstered, and of course the big fields and the good racing, frankly, at the former Calder facility all through the 2-month tropical season, ended up creating tremendous numbers. And not only were those numbers big, but it clearly helped yesterday when Gulfstream opened, because even with this conflict between Monarch and the Mid-Atlantic Co-op and no handle from them, Gulfstream was up 10% versus last year's opening day. Talk about this clever branding concept and how well that worked.
Well, you make a great point, and Steve, you know a lot of horsemen, and I can tell you that the horsemen that I know have been really positive about the developments here. I sort of felt badly. I go back when I was a lad and working in the publishing business. I go every year to Calder for Thanksgiving. Love the Calder track, and unfortunately, the Calder that I knew then is not what Calder has evolved to. So, PJ Campo and Timmy Rispo just did a great job. They put some money into the facility, which was badly needed. They put some money in the front side. They fixed up the turf course. And, what was crazy is that many days they were handling more money at Gulfstream Park West than the two tracks were handling together when they were running head-to-head. So it just tells you that, the racing fan didn't like the conflict and the difficulties. And I think that, I talked a little bit to P.J. Campo. As you know, he was promoted just on the last couple of days to GM of Gulfstream. And, he's a guy that I worked with for a number of years, and I think he's doing a great job. And I'm just happy for the race fans. I'm happy for the owners and trainers. And I'd be curious to what you guys hear about trainers that might be interested in staying in Florida all year round now.
Well, there's no question. And even before all of this transpired, there had been several horsemen that had made commitments to Tim Ritvo and talked when Tim and Mike Rogers were floating the concept of Gulfstream running virtually year-round, made commitments. Dale Romans said he would stay. Todd Pletcher committed to horses. Ralph Nix ended up staying and has been very happy. And then you fold in the existing horse base and trainer base from Calder, and you've got the recipe for excellent racing. And frankly, Charlie, even though we're not as concerned about this and don't discuss it much on this show, but Florida's breeding industry, Ocala, had been kind of laying on its side like a goldfish out of the bowl, and this scenario is really breathed some new life into the Florida horsemen's side of things on the breeding.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. John Malone, who's a very big guy in the cable business, has brought Bridlewood Farm up in Ocala, right. And his fellow was just over at the Keeneland sale, and they spent $3 million for weanling. Look, this is just great for the industry. It's got a lower cost base for trainers to live and work down there. Good weather, great horsemen. I mean, the people that you just cited, those are all top drawer, trainers. So, again, really good news for the industry. I'm really pleased that Timmy and PJ and the Stronach team are getting recognized for the great work they're doing down there.
Well, and let's fold this into the third part of your piece. And actually, you also talked about the Breeders' Cup. But there's an element, Charlie, and certainly Capital OTB customers aren't dealing with this right now. But there is an impasse between the Monarch Signal Negotiation Group headed by Scott DeRudy, and that is principally a lot of Stronach properties, plus a little bit more, Tampa Bay and a couple of other racetracks. And that group of signal negotiations versus the Mid-Atlantic Co-op, Phil O'Hara. And this is a situation where people just immediately assume that, it's the greedy racetracks, but it's not that simple. And you spent some time in this piece trying to explain to people why this is not only an important conversation, but it's a fair negotiation, and the idea that the bricks and mortar racetracks providing the signal for people to bet on, they need to get compensated appropriately, as opposed to these simulcast facilities and in some cases racetracks that aren't even running anymore. Suffolk and Colonial, for instance, and a few other facilities that are taking the lion's share of the wager. And this model has got to be repaired.
Yeah, I think that we could spend a lot of time on this, and I won't, but short story is that, when simulcasting started, everybody in the industry sold their signal for 3 points out of 20 points of takeout that's available. And that's because, you still had a robust on-track business, and you were making 10 to 15% that you split with your horsemen on track. And those days are gone. As we know, about 85% of the business comes from off-track, comes from simulcast facilities. So all of a sudden, you're splitting up whatever that simulcast fee is, 3%, 5%, 6%. So you and the horsemen are getting, let's say, 3 points each, and, the simulcast facility is getting 14. And I don't mean to denigrate it. I'm going to be in Tucson this week. I'm sure I'm going to see a lot of my buddies from the Atlantic Co-op. They're not going to be happy. But, look, the bottom line is, what do you have to do in a simulcast facility? Turn on the light, turn on the TVs, open the self-service mutual terminals or mutual clerks. And I just think the people that are spending money for the horses, the tracks that are running these great facilities, they need to get more money, or we're going to end up in a death spiral for the industry.
Charlie, and we absolutely could spend a full show on this topic. I will bring up the one opportunity, it seems, in the last couple of years that there was to have an industry-wide solution. And I'm sure I'm going to refer to Satish Sanan and the steering organization's suggestion of an industry-wide ADW. And we were inches away from that a year ago, January, and it fell apart. And I know you were involved in this pretty intimately. Fred Pope writes about this, and people think Fred's insane, but there's got to be a point where everybody acknowledges that the bricks and mortar have to be supported, and people that are creating ADWs out of thin air, they don't deserve a lion's share of the bet percentage. And until this is corrected, we're going to have a problem that is just not going to go away.
I think you're right, and I think that the biggest problem was the ADWs were set up outside of the context of racetracks. And even though Churchill now owns more than 50% of the ADW business, if you're a Twin Spires customer, you can't go into Churchill and use a card to make a bet. You can get online and so forth. So the ADW business is not integrated into the cost and pricing structure of racing. And until it is, and that continues to be the only part of the business that's growing, the industry is going to continue to hurt. So, that's a story for another day, but you put your finger right on the pulse. It's absolutely, significant issue.
Charlie, with the website, with thoroughbredracing.com now becoming more mature and attracting a wider and wider audience and covering issues like you wrote about and some of the guests that you've brought in with the international perspective. Talk about some objectives moving forward, what you've been happy with about TR.com and where you're headed.
Yeah, look, I was summarily dismissed from NYRA. We won't go into that. And, at that time there was a tremendous, not just in New York, but really around the country, a lot of negativity. And I knew there were some good things happening, in the U.S. market and some even better things, better organizational structures for racing in Great Britain, France. And I'd had the opportunity to experience some of that firsthand. So, we set up this business. We're based in New York. Ashley Harriman's our editor, who used to work in the PR department at NYRA. She's a journalism school graduate. And we've got a really great editor in Chris Smith in the UK. He does all of our sourcing of articles there, and a really good editor named Jessica Hours in Australia. So we publish in 8 different categories. We've done, things on the light side. Teresa Gennaro did a great profile of Tom Durkin. We've done profiles of Graham Motion. But we've also taken up, important topics like corticosteroids. Pat Cummings did a great story. I mean, we've got a big problem in America with the tracks where the run-ups to the starting gate, in some cases, could be 20 yards or they could be 120 yards. So the timing that we have for these races and the pace numbers that we're looking at are really inaccurate in many ways. So what it does for me is it gives me the opportunity to stay in the business, to really work with a lot of great minds, profile a lot of interesting things, and we'd be interested in any topics that you two gentlemen would like to have us write about. So it's been a good opportunity, and we also write about some of the tough things, but it's been a great ride so far, and if someone wants to get on the site, it's very easy. It's thoroughbredracing.com. You can sign up for a newsletter. We send out free 2 times a week, and again, appreciate the opportunity to talk about it today.
Charlie, it's our pleasure. The website is it's intelligent, sophisticated, none of the vitriol and agenda that certain other websites seem to have as their raison d'etre. So continued success, thoroughbredracing.com. Charlie Hayward, best wishes for the holiday season and the new year. Charlie, thanks so much.
That's Steve. A great pleasure to talk with you guys, and have a great holiday.
Charlie Hayward, and always valuable. And if you haven't seen his piece, good news. Follow them at Twitter as well, Thoroughbred Racing Commentary. TR Commentary is the moniker at Twitter, thoroughbredracing.com. We're going to talk to Mike Welsh next. We'll talk about yesterday's opening day at Gulfstream, 36% up on track. 10% even without the Mid-Atlantic Cooperative. A big day, big fields, competitive racing. Nick Zito, 2 years in a row, wins the Jewel. First time gelding for Catholic Cowboy, the secret. And we'll talk to Mike also about the Clocker Report, available at drf.com. Mike Welsh joins us next.
It's more than just a sports bar. It's Stadium Cafe. Located at 389 Broadway in Saratoga, it's the place to be for great times and great food. Their menu features everything from gourmet entrees to your favorite wraps and sandwiches. Or maybe you just want to grab a beer and catch the game. So what could be better than that? How about 2 Stadium Cafes? There's also the Westside Stadium, right up the road at 112 Congress Street. Same great menu, same great service. Whether you're hanging at the bar or just relaxing outside on their spacious covered patio, you'll always leave knowing you'll be back again.
We love, above all, the staff. We love Dave Harmon, and the food is fantastic.
Not 1, but 2. 112 Congress Street, 389 Broadway. Guaranteed to be a home run.
Stately Victor, final furlong of the Toyota Bluegrass, runs right by Patio Prado. Alan Garcia and Stately Victor, a 40-1 upset.
Dinah Zappa holding on. Dinah Zappa wins.
Horse of the Year Ghost Zapper, sire of 9 new stakes horses and 5 new stakes winners, including Grade 1 winner Stately Victor in 2010, standing at Adena Springs.
We're back on Loose on the Lead on this Sunday morning after opening day at Gulfstream Park. And who better to give us a quick review of the claiming crown and the start of the Winter Championship season at Hallandale than Mike Welch of the Racing Forum. Good morning.
Good morning, guys.
Mike, a pretty smashing day. Kind of hard for things to go wrong with 14-horse fields in almost every race.
Yeah, the fields were great. They were competitive races. The quality was good. So they handled $10 million, and that was compared to $8.8 million last year, and did it without the Mid-Atlantic money. And we were just discussing that briefly now. Last year, the Mid-Atlantic money was $700. I don't think you could say they lost $700 this year, because a lot of those people do have, ADW accounts elsewhere. Will find a way to bet. But I mean, it still took a little bit of a toll on it, and then it probably would have been another $250,000 higher. So all in all, smiles all around for everybody.
Well, and smiles all around before we look at some of the results. Smiles all around for those that utilize the DRF Clocker Report. I don't know if we were able to get that graphic. Mike, it is the start of the season, and much like we talked about at Saratoga this summer, a terrific opportunity to utilize you and Mike Vesey and the clocking team at all of the South Florida facilities. And you can sign up, people can sign up for the entire year, Friday, Saturday, Sunday coverage with the Clocker Report. Tell everybody about the advantage, and we're going to look, I think, at a graphic showing an example of the information.
Yeah, Mike Vesey right off the bat, the kitten horse out of Palmetto's yesterday in the second race. He had a very glowing report on just the one work he saw, and sure enough, I mean, he dominated that field. A big effort. Of course, it doesn't take much to go and much encouragement to go bet Mike Maker and Ken Ramsey on claiming crown days, even in non-claiming crown races. But yeah, drf.com/clocker. We've got a clocker at Palm Beach Downs that's overseeing the Pletcher Works now that he's moved to Palm Beach Downs, and you know, the usual Gulfstream Palmetto's coverage, and maybe a little pacing too. If I've got a guy that might get up there a couple of days a week too, but you know, we've increased the coverage over last year, and hopefully we'll have an even better year than we did last year. Well, and we just showed, and it's funny, we showed, I picked the Smoke 'em Kitten comment because it was obvious that Vesey, when he says son of Kitten's Joy, seems to be a talented individual, and it was just enough of an indication. Of course, you were going to have to deal with the outside post, but he was able to clear, and part of that included the way they spilled out of the gate. I also put up, Mike, one for today, which is Atreides, who, of course, is that speedy Stone Street runner, and I brought up Atreides because I thought it was important that we get some comments, because you seem to be concerned that he may be a little over the top. Well, I'm not going to use the words over the top. He's definitely not training as well the last month as he trained going into the Indiana Derby, and even a little bit coming out of it, but specifically going into it. That being said, I mean, an average work for him is a good work for almost every other horse. I don't think this horse is you know, he looks like he's fine physically and whatever. He just doesn't have that zip at the end of his works. I still think he's going to take some beating in here, but I'm not going to take 3 to 5 with the utmost of confidence as I would have 4 weeks ago. So it's kind of a caveat for bettors to look at, but you know, if he wins the race, it's certainly not going to surprise me. I mean, on edge, numbers edge, he's just so far superior to this field. But there's just enough of a doubt in there that maybe you want to throw a second horse into your numbers there, which would probably be Quiet Ruler. Now that Nick Zito's on a roll.
Mike, let me just ask you, because I did Gulfstream on the handicapping show an hour ago, and I thought the other interesting horse in there might be the uncoupled entry from Marty Wilson, Montana Cowboy.
Montana Cowboy worked great, and he's very fast, but you know, he couldn't have gone a half mile any easier and any more impressively, but he did shut down a little bit after that work, so getting a mile, you know, will be the issue. And Marty's not stupid. He's not going to put the two of them out there on the front end going after each other. I think he wants Atreides for early place. He knows Montana Cowboy is going to be on the lead. And look, if speed is carrying okay today, he wouldn't be the worst option in the world either. You know, how many times have we seen the bigger priced end of a stable coupling win the race? But you know, Atreides on numbers is just so far superior. He's really going to have to fall back not to beat this field, but there is the caveat that he's definitely not doing as well now as he was 4 or 5 weeks ago or 6 weeks ago.
And I just wanted to touch on, because I saw some tweets from you, and when I handicapped the card earlier, I had a lot of outside horses, both on turf and on dirt, but you noted yesterday outside on the turf was playing pretty well.
Wow, yeah, I mean, they were all the makers. They won from 14, 14, and 13. I was, you know, actually the first one, you know, we sat clear right over to the lead, so it didn't matter what post he was coming from. He was a front-running winner. He was the only front-running winner on the grass yesterday. Both courses seemed to be playing fair, I guess, maybe even leaning to a little off the pace, but we did have a speed winner on both tracks. So the track this morning for training was not lightning fast again. It was about the same as it was yesterday morning. Some quick times, but not some of the stuff we've seen here earlier this month, where half the tab were breaking 48 for half miles.
Mike, you mentioned Nick Zito, and Nick wins the Claiming Crown Jewel a second year in a row, which is a nice accomplishment. Catholic Cowboy, first time gelding, and ran a bang-up race under Luis Saez.
Yeah, no, that's as good of an equipment change, I guess, as you can get, including blinkers. He said it made a difference in him, and obviously it did. He worked, looked like he worked okay up there going into the race. The trip is the key right there, and we noted, as I noted in my analysis, that going a mile and an eighth, posts 10 through or even 9 on out have a distinct disadvantage, and probably made all the difference in the world, with a couple of those outside horses coming on running late. But Luis Saez put Catholic Cowboy in a perfect spot behind the speed, and he improved enough to get the job done. And it's 2 years in a row for Nick. He came up with a great quoting, as he usually does after the race. He said, "I'd love to win another Kentucky Derby, but if the good Lord wants me to win these things every year, I'll be happy with that."
He's the best. He was certainly, you could tell Nick was delighted with that outcome. And one of the other big wins, I thought, before I ask you about today's 7th with the 2-year-olds, the win by Stephen Dunn's Buster Rose absolutely came running in that new Canterbury, the Turf Sprint. That was impressive. He beat Mr. Online, and happy for Stephen Dunn, a small operator, Jeremy Rose aboard. That was a big effort.
Yeah, especially from where he came from. I mean, he went about 9 or 10 wide. The guys that do the sheet numbers, they're going to be off the charts with that ground loss in there. But, he did the right thing, as it turned out. I watched him as he was making the run and saying, where's he going? And, he just had so much horse. Getting him out in the clear was the best thing. And I know there was a claim of foul in there, but it was certainly didn't look like it was going to amount to anything, and it didn't. And, no, that was a great effort. Mr. Online, there was a question mark there, too, turning back and coming off the layoff. Do you want to take the short price? Obviously the best horse in the race from a class standpoint, and those who sided against got rewarded, just as they did earlier, when those that sided against Rebo Bobo. It wasn't an easy combination to come up with, but I know the White Rabbit people who are probably cashing after the race.
Exactly. Finally, Mike, we got to wrap, but today's 7th is the first 2-year-old dirt race of the Gulfstream season, and I think going to look outside here to Todd Pletcher and our friend Bo Lane has got the Warfront Colt, Old Mountain Lane, making a second career start, ran into Sky Hero in his debut at Keeneland in October, and he's kind of probably a best bet look going into that 7th race today.
Yeah, look, there's some interesting other options in here, but I mean, it's probably Old Mountain Lane's race to lose. I mean, he didn't have the greatest of trips breaking from the rail. He ran well. Now he's got a 7/8 under his belt, which is a difficult distance for under any circumstances, let alone for all the first timers in here. Todd's got another first. It's a knockout for Starlight, $350 at the sale. That's a little more than Starlight usually pays for a horse. He has a bullet work. If you look at Mike's report, it was just an okay report. Not Mike's. I'm sorry. Our clocker up there, Dave Norton's report on the November 30th work. That's the only one we've seen. So I would say I'd have to side with Old Mountain Lane in here. There's some other options. The Sun Wind ran well. Caught a pretty good horse himself, a more experienced horse. And Ralph Nix going 7/8 in his debut. So you have to respect that horse. But I think Old Mountain Lane's the right one.
I love it. We're off and underway at Gulfstream. We'll be checking in with Mike on a regular basis. The Clocker Report, you can get it for the weekends if you're a weekend warrior, or get it for the entire season, drf.com/Clocker. Mike, thanks so much.
Okay, guys. See you later.
Mike Welch.
Mike Welch from the Daily Racing Forum. And we're up against it. Clock on the wall says we're running a little late, so we'll wrap things up. Don't forget, questions, comments, suggestions. We'd love to hear from you. Loose on the lead at yahoo.com. Again, loose on the lead at yahoo.com. Seth Merrill from Equidaily, Steve Bick from Sirius and XM's At the Races. We're going to wrap up Loose on the Lead for this Sunday morning. We're here every week from 10 until 11 a.m. We'll see you again next time.
You're watching OTB TV, a service of Capital Off-Track Betting.